Ubisoft really needs a win right now. It was discovered earlier this year that across half a dozen of their studios, there is an ongoing culture of distrust between management and workers, with multiple sexual harassment claims filed, with the powers that be seemingly doing nothing about it. Change absolutely needs to happen. But at least we got some great games, right, out of all this pain and suffering. That's sarcastic, just want to make sure that's clear. Watch Dogs Legion is not a great game. The core function of what is supposed to entice you to play this game, the play as anyone feature, unfortunately hurts everything that makes Watch Dogs fun instead of making it better. In Legion, we are in an alternate modern London that has been subsumed by totalitarian technocratic forces after a false flag attack killed off most of the hacktivist group DedSec, the organization where our protagonist traditionally finds his origin. In this new London, freedom is slowly being eroded by forces that can now pretty much control everything in their citizens' lives. The populace is plagued with immigration detention, environmental disaster, and a lack of worker agency thanks to big business. Stuff that's happening right now around the world that we can relate to. Yet the core plot in Watch Dogs Legion isn't about racial justice or how technocrats are destroying the planet. It's outlandish sci-fi plots that have a Cockney gangster enslaving people with microchips for sex slavery and human butchery, or the creation of this kind of Minority Report system that kills people before they commit crimes. The ludicrousness of the main story undermines the world building that lend itself to the real problems we face. Now, speaking of undermining, when the story does find some interesting moments of catharsis, my everyman protagonist says something like this.
My nipple hurts. What the fuck happened to my nipple?
This is the most glaring way the Play as Anyone feature hurts the experience. How it affects the story. It's a remarkably ambitious system. Play as Anyone really does mean play as anyone, with any NPC you see on the street recruitable and also voiced in various cutscenes and missions you subsequently play. It is a technical achievement, but the goofiness and slapstick quality to most of these VO performances removes you completely from caring about the events of the game. It's not impossible to structure a narrative without the core emotional center of a protagonist, but since there's so many different characters you can play as, their lines are always a little bit different. So cutscenes, depending on the character, become a confusing mess with one character saying something that didn't really make any sense, and so on and so forth. So the question would be, why not just play as one character then, kind of make your own protagonist? Unfortunately, the game pushes you to shift and change as often as possible. Sometimes it's required for certain missions, other times a new character will have skills that they really want to entice you to try. The first couple of operatives you have won't have much special about them, but by the end of the game, you can play as a hitman vis-a-vis kind of John Wick, an old granny beekeeper that uses her bees to kill people, super spies with magic cars, and the list goes on. The truly unfortunate thing is once you get those special abilities, there's really nowhere to go with this character. You can't upgrade those abilities or really make changes to them, so the novelty of what each character can do wears off after a couple missions. Worse yet, if that hitman character that you've been looking for and trying to earn for hours and hours is a random citizen who maybe talks or looks in a way that you don't particularly like, there's very little you can do about it. There are some core skills that are usable with everyone you recruit, so ultimately, the idea of having a specialist trait becomes something that's less and less important. By the end of the game, I just ended up role-playing with characters that seem to be the most likable and won't break every single cutscene they're in. The game touts this idea of collectivism as the only thing that will defeat the forces of injustice. And I thought that meant playing as multiple character specialists on various missions, all working together as one well-oiled machine. In practice, though, you are given the option to switch characters at any time during gameplay, but the load times in between switching are so unforgiving that they completely take you out of the experience. There's no real way to work as a team. Once you make that switch, the character that you were playing as goes off and, buys groceries and lives their life. Instead of getting one full fleshed out protagonist, that protagonist is now cut into 20 different pieces in 20 different people that are called upon to do missions and work without having the other. It just really feels like a lopsided experience from top to bottom. And the really upsetting thing is everything else works in Legion. The hacking and the world building is solid. There's tons to explore and interact with in New London. The gamble, though, of this gimmick as play as anyone, in my opinion, didn't pay off. And if it was stripped out and replaced with a strong narrative lead or even a series of leads like in GTA 5, it would have been a much fuller and better experience. What's more upsetting is to know what the studios were going through, and this is what we got. I understand many people go into making a game, but I just don't think it's worth it to have people work this hard and have this experience when we get something like this.